Okay. Um, Good evening, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, today is Goa. Welcome to Goa MuleSoft Meetup. First, welcome to all. So, thank you for joining. First of all, I know today is a Monday that's for India, and it may be a early morning for different regions. So, first of all, I would like to thank all whoever joined here. And today's session is going to be a very interesting. That will be an introduction to Anypoint Partner Manager. So before moving to our topic, we'll introduce our Goa meetup organizers or Goa meetup leaders. We have Gaurav Dubey. So Gaurav, he unable to join maybe. He's a MuleSoft mentor and a Goa meetup leader. He's working as a Capgemini Australia. And we have Vinay. Vinay, you can introduce yourself to audience.
Yeah, thanks, Vandana. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Goa MuleSoft Meetup. And myself, Vinay Kumar. I'm having total 6+ years of experience in IT industry. Currently, I'm working as a senior software engineer with Digital Bus, and I'm MuleSoft certified developer. That's it, Vandana. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Vinay. And myself, my name is Vandana Gowda. I have total 3 years of experience in IT in MuleSoft. I'm working as a senior software engineer at Gensa Technologies. If you are interested part of a Goa meetup, if you are interested to speak in our event, so please reach out me either via Slack or LinkedIn, so I can host you guys. Okay. And next we'll move to our speaker. So we have John. So, John, you can introduce yourself. So, you already know who is John, most of them. So, yeah.
Hello, good morning and good evening. Well, my name is Juan Curvaso. I am a software engineer. I am working as a software architect at Avio Consulting. I've been on the integration world for more than 14 years. I've been working for more than 20, but well, 14 I'm focused on integrations only with different tools. And well, now with MuleSoft for the last almost 7 years. I am a meetup leader at Bahia Blanca, that's the city where I'm living right now. I'm also the meetup leader of the Spanish online group. I'm also certified as an architect, as a developer on the different levels, and I'm also a MuleSoft ambassador.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
You're
So,
welcome.
you can share your screen and over to you, John. Thank you so much. Let me stop sharing. Yeah.
All right. So the agenda for today is going to be focused on Anypoint Partner Manager. But before talking about Anypoint Partner Manager, I wanted to bring some B2B concept so we can have all the, let's say, the words that we're going to be using across the presentation. Like I was saying before, we are going to have an introduction of the different main key concepts that we need to know in order to use the tool. And then we're going to see the tool live, like how it behaves, what it does. But we're going to only scratch the surface. The idea of this meetup is going to give the introduction so you can have the basic tools to go into the documentation, into the app, start using it, or also by checking the documentation, you will understand in an easier way why we have a tool like this. Because you can also think that whatever you are building with this tool is something you may want or you can build with just MuleSoft code. And that's true, but there are other advantages that we're going to highlight, and we're going to make the statement on why we need a tool like this and not just create integration like we do in general with MuleSoft. We're going to talk about Partner Manager, the key concept, that's what I was mentioning before. Also the architecture, the outcome of the things that we build, how you can see them on Runtime Manager, what they do. We will have the demo and then the section for Q&A and networking. So starting with the B2B concepts. B2B involves usually more than one trading partners. There are two different businesses that need to send documentation. Let's imagine that business A needs to send to the business B a purchase order. I think everyone will be understanding what we're talking about. We're talking about actually a purchase order. So the business acknowledge that they received the purchase order. Imagine that someone sends 2 copies, 1 copy is received by the other business, it's signed, and they return that to the person that delivers that purchase order. After that, they send a delivery note. They invoice so they can get the money. The other person receives the money. And all these are like the commercial documents that are flowing from one business to the other. So these are actually documents in most of the cases that are going to be written in paper. So they exist and they have a certain legal value. They represent a lot of things. These documents on the, let's say, electronic world are replaced by the EDI. EDI, it stands for Electronic Data Interchange. And what it does, what's the benefit of this, is that we're going to have a representation of those documents that we were sending from one business to the other in an electronic way. And why it's very important to understand this concept and understand that we're sending documents that they have value, that people need to pay things due to those documents. So these EDI, they exist from early 70s. They are very standard. They're sent point to point. We need to think that when you have a standard like this, a lot of businesses have apply rules, knowledge, and these kind of documents, they're going to have all the things that we need in order to represent each entity that or each document that we need to send from the businesses. Ideally, they don't require human intervention. When two businesses are talking with EDI, you are not expected to have someone delivering that. This is going to be a software in an automated way that is going to send the information from one place to the other. And we have several standards, X12, EDI FACT, EDI HIPAA, based on the business. Different standards have been developed. So they can apply different rule sets, different fields. You have to imagine that these kind of documents, they should allow you to represent your business all the things that you need. And if they don't, they most of the time they have optional fields or you can extend them. There are different ways to adapt those documents into your business. And remember, they are all documents that they exist from a long time and they have been used on very different, let's say, type of businesses. So they cover most of the use cases. For example, in X12, the purchase order is a document 850. The standard defines you how you should name all the different fields, how you should put the information, the structure, so anyone can understand when you are sending a purchase order. So you can send it to different businesses, but if you agree with the partner, those other businesses, that you're going to be using a certain specification, a certain type of document, they will understand you and there will not be any type of misunderstanding. So thinking from API perspective, it's a bit different, but it has the benefit that it's a standard and everyone knows you have a documentation, you have different versions. There's no room for misunderstanding with this type of document. And they look like this. They are plain text files. They have a certain structure. I remember when I was at university, these are the files that are the fixed limit by a character. So they have certain characters to split the information in several places. The information has a fixed size. So for example, in certain fields like this or this, these are the identifiers. You have to use a certain amount, fixed amount of characters. If you don't fulfill that need, the document is not well written. And if it's not well written, the partners can't read it. They don't understand it. And as you see here, it is saying that it's a document 850. And in here, we have the version of the document. There are a lot of things that these kind of documents are going to tell us. They split the document within segments. They have the header, they have the lines. In most of the cases, we're going to be sending like invoices or purchase orders. In those cases, you always have a ship from, a ship to, the one who buys, the one who sells, what you are selling, the header that it will group that particular order, the purchase order number or the sales order number, all the items. As you can see in here, small widget one and medium, those are the different items. So these documents, they allow you to put a lot of information inside them. But reading the document from the technical perspective, most of the time is very challenging. So what is a B2B? It's a communication between two systems which from which act on behalf of businesses. So we are talking about software that is representing a partner or a business. They use, like I was saying before, EDI. They use a standard way of communication. Usually they send a lot of information together. They group like a bulk of purchase orders. Think about a retail, for example, like could be Costco, Walmart, those kind of businesses. They send a lot of purchase orders to the different providers or the suppliers, and they have a lot of information, a lot of from to lines. Imagine that these EDIs can grow a lot. Like I was saying before, they don't require human intervention. That's the idea of the B2B. So in here, I created a very basic use case so we can understand why we need a tool like this. So we have business A and business B. Pretty straightforward. One is sending the purchase order and the other one is sending the ACK, meaning I received the purchase order. If we need to add another business, and it needs to also send the same document, that's doable. Let's say we can enable that. But if we have to think, if I have to create that software, if I have to do it by myself with MuleSoft, I will have to create one endpoint. And based on the API lead structure that I'm building, I may need another experience API if I have another business, if I am with that granularity, if I am thinking about let's say an experience API for all my clients, I may use the same experience API. But then I have another type of document because another business wants to talk with me, but he wants to send me an invoice, not a purchase order. And I have to respond with a different document with a payment order. So as you can see, there are different documents that are going to be in the picture. So if I have to implement that, I will need to understand different type of documents. And as you saw before, those type of documents are not easy to read. And keep thinking about what could happen if I keep adding businesses into this picture. So it's hard to scale if you need to expand not only the document, but also the businesses. And if within those businesses, they need to send us more documents, it's very hard to scale. So that's why we have this type of software. It will speed up the connection between the partners, and I will show you later why. It also provides traceability, and this is something very important when talking about B2B. The different, let's say, admins, they need to know where the transaction was. If it was successful, you have to think that you need traceability because all those documents, in most of the cases, they will there will be things that you're going to be paying. Basically, they will handle money, transactions, a purchase order, a sales order, a payment, so invoices. They are very related to the money that a company will expend. So that's why we need a very important traceability of the transaction. Something that it's not a minor, we need the ability to configure ACK. And the standard, these EDI standards, they specify a lot of uh, several ACK types. You have technical ACKs, you have functional ACKs, and based on that, the business can behave on one way or the other. We also need to combine legacy EDIs with APIs. In some scenarios, you can have a very nice API lead structure, but if you have a lot of partners that they only talk with EDI, they will not talk with your APIs. So that's why we need like this plug to enable that. And something very important is that we can scale trading partners through configurations. I was saying in the previous example, I need to develop based on each document and supply that. In this case, you have a tool like this that is low code, you will worry more on what you will have to do and not how to do it. So what you need a partner with this document and you focus on that. And probably if you have an API on the other side, you will focus on the mapping of the information, which is something you can do using a spreadsheet. And then if you don't have the technical ability to create a data whip for that, you can find a MuleSoft developer to do it. But it's going, and you will provide the mapping from the EDI to the API. That's something we have to take into consideration and very important. And also, what the tool like this offers based on the traceability of the transaction, the ability to manage, monitor, and resolve issues. Most of the time, we need to, there is a tracking number on the transactions that you can share with the different vendors or providers that you are talking with. That they have a lot of rules most of the times. The ability of being able to track, retry, and see what they send is very important. And the infrastructure to have that when you are doing the API by yourself is like a lot of effort. And in the tool like this, you will have it already in place. So as you can see, Partner Manager, it does a lot of things. Partners, they will send you X12, EDFAC, CSV, XML, JSON files. The tool can listen in several protocols, AS2, FTP, SFTP, HTTP. Partner Manager it will use the configurations, it will deploy the message flows, and that's something we will talk later. There are some concepts that we will need to enforce in order to have like the same language. And based on the information that the partner send and what we configure, it will talk with probably an API or something on our enterprise network. That's the idea. The idea is that the tool allow us to talk with more partners and give us a way to scale in a fast way. So we have, for example, in here, this picture is something interesting. And it shows how Anypoint Partner Manager fits into the API lead architecture. As you can see, we have the experience layer. In the experience layer, we will have our mobile experience API or e-commerce API, but also when we need to talk with partners, here is where Partner Manager fits. Because for each partner, we are creating our message flow to adapt to their needs. Even though we're going to be using EDI standard, and like I was saying, is very tight. They have a lot of rules. Everything is already in place. But each partner can extend the EDI standard, and they can have their own configuration, and they may need to use a different, character to split the information. Those kind of things are the things that we are going to grab and configure within Partner Manager. So that way, for each partner, we know how to talk to each one of the partners. We know what documents we're going to be sending, that thing we're going to configure. And then with all that information, we are going to translate those documents into things that are going to fit in our API ecosystem. So far, so good. Questions? All right. So let's going to talk about the main cons. Well, partner is, we can say, the concept because it's like the business that we are representing is the one that we are going to be on behalf of. It has to be uniquely identified, and there are different ways to identify the partner. There's something called identifier, and we will talk more about that later. And there are two types. The host partner, that is the company that we are, and the trading partner, the companies that we want to talk with. The identifiers, that's let's say, the concept that uniquely identifies a partner. It's like the, let's say, security number, something like that. You need to have a way to identify a partner in a very unique way. And that's something that it will apply for the partners within a business unit. If you are using a different org, you can duplicate the identifier, but that's a different story. Within your org, they cannot be duplicated. I don't think even the tool will allow you to duplicate that. They will give you an error. Like I was saying, you cannot duplicate them. Oh, something very important. We have different types of identifiers. So based on the document type you are using, if it is EDI or if it is X12, there are different types of identifiers. Even for AS2, you have to use identifiers, and those are different types. Like I was saying, we have the X12, the EDFAG, and we have something called reference ID. The reference ID is a type of identifier that is unique for this tool, and it's a way to identify partners on on JSON payloads, on CSV payloads. Host partner. Now that we talk about partners in general, we talk about identifiers, we can say that host partner is us. It's the business that is the business unit in the platform. It's unique. You cannot create a new one. It will be automatically created when the entitlements are done and you access the first time on the UI. It's the main organization that is going to be in all the message flow. And why I put this? Because in here, we're going to be creating message flows to receive information and to send. So you have to think that for each message flow, you will have two parties, host partner and trading partner. If it is an outbound, trading partner, host partner, if it is an inbound. So always two partners for the message flows. No more. And in here, we can configure a lot of things like certificates. There's something called payload storage, and are related to our host partner. And for example, if we are the ones that we want to talk with a different EDI configuration, that is different from the default, we will configure that there. Payload storage, that's also a concept that is very important. When you start playing around with this tool, something, or let's say the first thing that you need to configure in order to use the tool itself to create this thing called message flows is the payload storage. And why is that? The tool does not store within the system the payloads. But if you need to retry, if you need to see the transaction information, a lot of things that you need the payload are going to be stored on the place that the customer, the one that is configuring the tool, set. So there is an API that is also a YAML file that is published on Exchange that you need to download. You need to implement that API. And with that in place, you configure the payload storage API in the tool. That way, the tool is configured and ready to be used. This payload storage API, if you configure so you can uncheck the capability to see the payload, but if you check it and leave it as available, you can see the payload that were sent from one place to the other, even what you receive and what you are sending to the APIs, or the other way around, what you receive from the APIs and what you are sending to the partners. So the capability to see what is moving from one place to the other exists. You have to configure it, but this API is a must to start using the tool. Without the payload storage API in place, you cannot. In the example I will show in the demo, what I did, I created a very basic API using an object store because I don't mind if the data is lost because just for a demo. So I implemented that YAML file and I'm storing whatever I need to in an object store that is going to be deleted in 30 days. But there are some other examples on Exchange using S3, if I'm not wrong, and also if you want, you can store that information in a database. So it's very important to highlight this because if you don't have this, you cannot create any, you cannot deploy any message flow. All right. Questions so far? Good. Trading partners. Trading partners, let's say it's the counterpart. It's the different, it's not a host partner, it's the other one that is on the other side from the message flow. We have, like we were saying, we have two partners always, the host and the trading. They represent the other organization that we're going to be talking with. So the user has to create them, the user needs to configure in them, the user needs to set up the identifiers of those partners, because think this way, remember the EDI file, we have two different identifiers. They have like a string of a number or an ID. Those IDs are the ones that we need to know. One is going to be our ID. That's going to be on the host part, but the other one is going to be the trading partner ID. And we need to know it because that way we're going to be able to identify who sent that information or that document. And we can apply the different rules that we have and also search the different, let's say, logic that we need to run. And like I was saying, for the host partner, you can configure different aspects of the EDI specification that they are using. If they are using something in particular, you will configure it there. So for each trading partner, you can have its own configuration regarding the documents, the endpoints, the certificates. Those are the things that we will configure for each trading partners. Message types. Still, we are not talking about message flow. I'm saying all these key concepts because we're going to go to the most important one. Message type is what we configure when we say I need to send an 50, I need to receive a JSON. I need to send a JSON. I need to talk to the API. I need to receive from another EDI software a purchase order or an invoice. We create the message type to represent that. So it's document that we're going to be using in the communication channel. Like I put in here, types are going to be validated and honored. If they are not properly written, for example, if the X12 has something that it's not like we are configuring or it's not using any, if we don't configure anything and it's using the default and it's not following the correct format, it's going to fail. We're going to see an error and it's going to tell us this EDI document is wrong because this is wrong. For example, there is one part where you have to put the number of lines that you have for that segment. And if that number of lines doesn't match what you are sending, it's going to error out and it's going to tell you, no, I was not able to process this because the file is not honoring the schema. But if you're using XML or JSON, you don't need to specify in schema. And if you don't need to specify in schema, the system, the partner manager is not going to validate that. But you have to think that it's very flexible. In my other lives, I've been working with B2B documents in XML schema format. It was a bit nasty, but the same thing that you saw in the plain text file was formatted in an XML file, and it was not nice. I don't know if I like any of those, but it is what it is. Endpoints. With endpoints, where we are reaching the message flow. With endpoints, what we have here is the access point to communicate with the partners. And why we have this, like when we are talking about APIs, we know that we are going to have a software listening on a specific host, on a specific port, on an URI. And if we give that to the clients for that API, we know that we're going to give them the different operation, what they need to send, the end. Well, in here, when you're talking about B2B, you need to also specify a listener. That's why we have the endpoints. And from the endpoints perspective, we have different roles for the endpoint. First of all, you can use different protocols, and that sounds like pretty similar to what we were talking about the API. And the protocols are very tight. You can only use this protocol by the moment. As long as they keep developing the tool, I'm guessing that more protocol may be enabled. By the moment, those are the ones that we can use. And then based on the type, it changes responsibility. And this is related to what I was saying before. If you need an endpoint to receive, you're going to use one type of endpoint. If you need an endpoint to send information, to send an ACK, or to send an outbound message, you will have to use a different type of endpoint. The endpoints, we can say, are the entity, are the communication channel that allow us the systems to talk within each other, within the different partners. But you have to think it this way. If you have to talk with, think this way. You have partner A, partner and host partner, and you need to talk with partner A. You need a way to either receive what they are sending and also reply them back. So that's why we need to specify the endpoints. And now here, this is the star of the day. This is the most important, let's say, type, the message flow. The message flow will combine all the previous concepts. They can be inbound or outbound. Like I was saying, you want to receive a document and you also want to send a different document. And we're always talking about, in most of the cases, EDI documents. That's why it's B2B. This is the entity that binds the host partner with the trading partner, and it's going to be a one-to-one relationship. And it's not only going to be a one-to-one relationship, it's going to be a one-to-one relationship that it will also specify the message type and the receiving endpoint. So It's going to be a one-to-one entity, but with a unique key of host partner on one place, trading partner on the other, message type, and receiving endpoint. So when we put all those things together, that's when we can identify one message flow. So we will create this entity. We will store a lot of information about if it is an inbound document, what identifiers we need to use to detect if it is from one partner or the other. We will select what partner we're going to be talking with on that message flow. We will select the message type that we will be receiving and also sending. And we are going to select a transformation, a data with code that we need to apply to the information that we receive to create the information that we need to send in, for example, if it's an inbound to our API. So we will select a lot of things. And also in the middle, you can configure if you want to send an ACK, if you want to send a technical ACK, if you want to send a functional ACK. Those are more details that give more complexity to this entity. Things that you can configure. They are not right now our main focus, but you can do that. You can do them. But very important is that you have to say, to create one or to identify one message flow, you need not only the host partner, because the host partner, like I was saying, it's always in the picture, but you need a trading partner, an endpoint, and a message type. With all that information, we will narrow down and we can say, here is one message flow. That's the key of that message flow. And something very important, a message flow is not a MuleSoft app. It's a combination of Mule apps that are going to be deployed on the MuleSoft runtime. And using all the metadata that we created on the message flow, it will do its magic. So, for example, first of all, any questions around what is a message flow? All right, cool. So in a message flow, you will have an inbound type. Well, first a type. Then you will have an identifier of the partner, the receiving endpoint, and the message type. These are the three key values to identify one message flow. You can have a second message flow, but in this case, it will reuse, for example, the same receiving endpoint and the message type, but it will change the partner identifier. So it's a different message flow. And you can have a third one that it could match the partner identifier. But if it is an outbound, then it's a new message flow. And if we use a different endpoint or a message type, then it becomes a new message flow. So you can ask me, what if I select same type, same identifier, same endpoint, and same message? The platform will not allow you to create a new message flow matching. Oops. Okay, I'm back. The platform will not allow you to create a message flow matching these three main entities, or let's say configurations, and you cannot create a duplicate message flow. You will have to always change something or around these three specifically. And activities. Now, the last concept I will talk is about what you will see on the part. This is the section of the tool that it will show all the interactions within the different partners, divided within transmissions and messages. And this is because with one EDI, you can send one EDI transmission. That means one software sending the HTTP request or sending the file to our platform, our endpoint. You can send one transmission or many transmission, or within each transmission, one or more messages. We also see in here the the ID of those calls and also the ID of the message flow that it was executed there. And if we want, and it's configured to, we can see the payloads. That's, let's say, these activity sections is the monitoring section of the tool. So now I will jump into Partner Manager. So I talk about host partner. In this case, this is the host partner, as you can see. The same name you see in the org is the same name you will see here as a host partner. This is the payload storage that I created and I deployed in here. You can change the URL because you need to specify where it's implemented, where it's running. And you have different configuration around certificates. In this case, I created an insecure. I'm not using HTTPS, I'm using HTTP, but it's just a demo. And you can select different type of authentication, the headers, and pretty technical, we can say. Then we have the identifiers. The identifiers are the identifiers of the host partner. This is how I will identify my partner. So if I'm using these identifiers, it means that in an X12, in the ISA header, if I have a mutual defined identifier type, all this is what I was like showing in the plain text file. Well, it will be there. And this is the value I am expecting if something is for me. Then we have the certificates, and then I don't have any. The endpoints, and all the different endpoints that we will use in our message flow. Here it's also showing on what message flows these endpoints are used. Then we have the message type, another concept that we talk, that in here we select what type of document we're going to be sending on the message flows. And here it shows you, example, on what message flows we are using this type, and also if it is deployed or not. You can use JSON files where you can upload the schema if that's optional. This one is one that is used, and it will show you on what message flows we are using that. You can have custom attributes now related to the message flows, and then you can use them for search on the activities, and these are the different configurations. So a lot of things happens here, and in a similar way within the partners, you can have, let's say this is the one I've been using. You need to have the different identifiers. If you create identifier, it will, for example, for ISA, you can create based on the type you want. There are a lot of different businesses, and these type of identifiers, they also probably have a different type of rule. So that's why you need to specify them. And then you set up the value and you create them. Again, on the partner side, we will see certificates, endpoints. Certificates are used with HTTPS endpoint, with AS2 endpoint, and SFTP endpoint. So every time you see something with that requires a certificate, you can upload it in here. You can create the public certificate or the identity key. You will have to use a PEM file to upload that. And all these certificates or keys, they are all stored within Secrets Manager. So behind the scenes, it's using Secrets Manager to store all that information. And now the important part, the message flows. This one is an inbound message, an outbound message flow, and this one is an inbound because it's for X12 version 410 850 to a supermarket, and here is from a supermarket. Let's start with the inbound. In the inbound, what we have in here is the endpoint that we're going to be listening, what message type. We also have the identifiers that we can use when using this message type. You can, in the selection of the endpoint, what you choose within the endpoint that fulfill the rule of that of the receiving endpoint. You cannot use an outbound endpoint to receive. That's why you have to set the responsibility every time you create an endpoint. For example, if you create select, but you create new, we will say, let's say HTTPS, who is the owner, the description. If it is using VPC, you can manage those endpoints with API manager and apply policies, which is very good. You set up the base path and that's it. And think about something. We don't see in here any kind of configurations around where we're going to deploy this, how many vehicles we're going to apply to this. All that part is running behind the scenes. The source message, we will select in here. You select what type of message you want to select. If you want to send an acknowledgement, functional acknowledgement, if you want to send an acknowledgement, you need to configure on what endpoint, because in here we are receiving. If we need to reply to something, we need an endpoint from that partner, that is this guy, to send the ACK. These kind of ACKs are also part of the standard, so we don't need to specify anything. We will get the file, we will create this APM, will create the ACK payload, and it will send it. Before going in here, I will want to check like what I'm going to be sending on what endpoint. At B2B, sorry, yes. In this case, it's from my host. In here, this is like the tricky part of the low code tool. We need to create a data web script to read, and this is how there is one specific connector behind the scenes that reads that plain text file. It creates a Java object. That Java object has this, let's say, path or this structure. It's a payload with one attribute called transaction set. Inside that one, it can have like different versions. So there is like an array. And again, within the version, it will have an array of documents. That's why I was saying you can send transmissions, messages. The X12 connector that it reads that file, it will create this structure. And using this structure, we need to create the data web code to start or create our payload. And as you can see, based on some information on the different segments of the document, we will be putting like if it is a new or a cancel or an update, the order type, it will be extracted from here, the order number from different fields. So all this kind of mapping is the mapping that we need to create and we need to build, like I was saying before, with the spreadsheet. Because what we will get from the B2B perspective, we will get a specification from the partner telling us, in this field, I will be start sending you the lines, it will tell you. Or for example, in this field, we will have the contact name. So you will have to know that you have to check the section 310N1 and look for the section 360 to check to get the contact number. So these kind of things are the ones that we need to first translate using paper or a spreadsheet. I am more familiar with a spreadsheet, so you have to create that as a functional person and then create a translation in DataWave. This is the only, let's say, technical part of the tool. And within that, we will click deploy. And after we deploy, I don't want to mess with what I have, so I'm not going to hit deploy, and I don't remember if I have enough available vCores. Once we deploy, we'll see that this that is deployed, and what we will see, and let's, before jumping into that, I will do something else. I have on a different window. Let me share that window. I have in here an EDI document. This one is the inbound endpoint that I configure. This is the document type I am sending. And this is the ISA header. This is the one that is going to identify who is sending and who is receiving. This is the type of identifier I am sending in here. Same for the second one. We have different, this is the version of the document, this is the number of the purchase order I'm sending. And the different sections, or who, the address, the different line about the what I'm sending. These are different descriptions of each line. All this information, and I created one dynamic. I was like playing around. This is the transaction number, and I made it dynamic with a function. And the same for the transaction number of the document. So what's happening? In here, I can duplicate the document numbers because I remove a constraint on the uniqueness of the document. By default, it's set. So you should always send a different transaction number and different document number. Otherwise, the tool will fail. So I will send one, for example, and let's do something wrong, and I will put in here. So I just send two documents into the platform. Now let's jump back to our manager. We don't see anything yet. If we refresh, let's transmissions. Well, we don't see any messages because in both cases, the transmission failed. Oh, it's not looking very nice. Let me change my screen resolution a little bit. I think I am with less than is required. Let's see here. Now it's better. So what we see here is that the X12 validation failed. Oh, there is a duplicate interchange. So it makes sense why it failed. I was saying that I removed that, but no, I was wrong. I didn't remove that. So it is complaining because the transaction was duplicated. And he's right. I said it in the past. So let's send one that is different with the random numbers. And now we see that it's being processed. And now I will send the one with the random numbers with the wrong field on purpose. Vera, do we have validation on the document number? Yes, that's the validation we are saying. Behind the scenes, the X12 connector has a connection with the object store, and it will store each document ID that it receives. So unless we on purpose say, don't validate the documents, and you do it that from here, you need to specify on the partner. X12 validation. This is the validation around the segment, too many, every transaction, control number here. This is the validation about the control numbers. And if I go to the activity again, we see one message that it was delivered and a failure message. The one that it was failed, error out, we need to understand why. We will see the transaction then, the transmission, sorry. Within the transmission, this one was fine and this one was with an error. And the error in here was with the transaction. It's not nice how it's playing that. Now it's bigger. Now it's better. So the number of the included segment does not match the actual count. That's what I on purpose changed one of those segment numbers. So it failed due to that. And it was not able to move forward. The platform, the software detected that it was this message type, detected the endpoint, the supplier, but it was not able to progress. And in this one, it was successful, it has a transaction, and everything went well. And we can see the payload if we want with this. How we can effectively leverage Anypoint parameter to implement robust validation routing of incoming EDIs based on a specific header. The validation about what you are going to be calling is based on the configuration you are setting. So if we go to a message flow, say, let's create a new one, receive from partner. Say a supermarket again. We select the endpoint, this one, for example. And in here, sorry, let's one more thing. Let's add what type of document. Let's say let's receive this test. That is a JSON file. How it will detect that it has to route into this message flow, it will be based on all these identifiers, the endpoint, and the message type. So that's how it's going to know where to call the target API, endpoint, whatever. So that's the way that the tool is built, and that's the way it will, let's say, select what translation based on the payload that it's receiving that it has to trip. I don't know if that responded to your question. And then for the control numbers, that's the validation I was referring, but that's the validation from the EI side. So that's the EDI connector perform the validation. If you have to do a validation on a specific value, that's something you will have to do on the API side after the translation. I don't recall that you have a way. I remember you can add custom message attributes, but this is just a metadata that you're going to extract from the message that you received, that it will allow you to search for using that in here, but you cannot enforce a rule. Welcome. And then that is load metadata for easy mapping. That's something you can do on the At least what I used to do, I used to use VS Code to create a mapping. So for example, um, wait, Anypoint Studio does load the metadata. So you can use the metadata from Anypoint Studio to create the mapping based on what you have as a connector. But in order to do that, you need to import a specific project that is also in Exchange, so you can have the basic structure, and it's going to be easier. That's the way to do it in an easier way. Now that we saw what we have in here, how it these guys that looks, or the message flow that look like something that it's all together, it is not. And why? Because on the runtime manager side, and I will try to speed it a little bit, you will see this. You will see something called B2. Every time you see a B2B prefix, it's a MuleSoft API that is part of the bundle of the solution. So we have API replication, document processing, inbound, outbound. All these are the different components that are deployed based on what we configure on Partner Manager that are going to give the life to the things that we saw. In this case, for example, if we go to the logs, we will see some logs about the transmissions that we were sending. So this is the component listening. Then on this one, there is document processing. We will see some steps around the document that we send. And for example, no schema validation for this message type. So there are some log messages around here that it will let you know if the app is working or not, if the solution is working or not. And as you can see in here, something named this word queue, behind the scenes is also using queues to send information across the different components. So to make it easier to understand, let's go to the architecture. We have Partner Manager on the management plane, and then on the runtime plane, we have all these APIs. The replication service, that was the one I was showing, the outbound endpoint, the inbound endpoint, and the document processing service. All these different APIs are the ones that give a life to the message flow. Outside our box of the app is the storage payload API. That API can reside everywhere, anywhere. It's up to the client. So they can store that wherever they want. But in here, we need to take into consideration that we have these components. If any of these component is not running, or it's you're out of beacons and it fails, the solution will fail. To make it more direct on CloudHub, as I was saying, we have the receive endpoint. We have an Anypoint MQ queue. That's why I was saying we have a queue that is sending the messages to this other component. That's TPS, the document processing service. This one is the one that identifies, validates, and transforms. In here, all the metadata that we configure on the UI, it's somehow transforming to code, and it will process the document based on that. But in here, we slowly get some information about what type of document is, who is the sender, and based on that, we search for the correct message flow to trigger the transformation and select on what endpoint we need to send. These two endpoints are generic endpoints. If certain configuration matches, then you don't need to have like another one. It will reuse, and using the dynamic configuration of the connectors, it will save us a lot of beacons. Because if you have to think that this is, let's go back to the very beginning of the meetup. If you have to get one experience API for different clients, you will spend a lot of beacons there. So this is the power of this kind of solution. You will have only one receiving endpoint, point one or point two, or whatever you need to handle your load for one end, for the receiving endpoint, and then you will handle all the calls from there. Or if you need to have multiple protocols, you will have different endpoints for each protocol. That's something that it's one app per protocol, and that's it. You don't need to replicate the listener, even for example, with AS, HTTPS or AS2, where you have to configure a mutual authentication using certificates from the client and yours. You will be able to add the client certificate into a trust store, and that's something configured with the UI automatically, and then it will deploy those certificates into the API, so the API can accept the request from those clients, and it will not fail, and you will have only one endpoint that automatically will be including certificates from the different providers, from the different partners. So from the configuration perspective, it's a lot of time saving that you're going to be having using that. And then we have the replication service that is the component that I mentioned. I didn't mention too much. It's the one that it's making the solution decoupled from the management plane. If some communication happens within the management plane and the runtime itself or the different components of the runtime, replication managers contains information about the message flow that are deployed, contains all the tracking information. And so if communication stop at some point in time, it will hold all that information. Yes, it requires the licensing for EDFAC and AS2 connectors there, payment. Indeed, you need to have all those entitlements. Otherwise, you won't be able to use APM. APM can be deployed also on RTF. In the past, you were able to deploy it on-prem, but that was deprecated last year. Funny thing, it was the first version was only on-prem. Then we moved into Cloud Hub, and now we have it on RTF. And for RTF, you need to set up an MQ, JMS or Active MQ queue in order to allow the communication between the components. Well, we saw the partner manager out in runtime manager, and I have all this list. Let me send this list of links in the chat because they are useful links about the documentation, the different projects for the mappings that you can have, also the templates for creating those easy mappings. You will open this project, the template B2B EDI inbound, and with that project in Anypoint Studio, you will see all the metadata that the connectors create for the X12 message. And I think I'm done. Almost on time. Thank you very much for listening. Any questions?
I think I hope everyone clear with the session, right?
I know there are a lot of concepts that we talked. The idea is to at least give a very high overview of what we have in here, what you need to go and learn so you can go into the, but at least now you know that what is a partner, what is a document, what type of document we're trying to use with this tool. And well, that's the goal, to have something that it can scale for different partners using only configuration.
Yeah. So anyone have any questions? Please let us know. So John can answer those.
Sure. You can also reach me on LinkedIn and always answering there too, or in the Slack chat.
Yeah. I guess no one have any questions. So we will upload this session recording in 1 or 2 hours. I can upload that, so you can refer if anyone missed this session. So and also John shared with all links and all. So please take that backup if anyone needed. Yeah, I guess no questions. If any questions, please connect John on LinkedIn or Slack so we can answer your doubts. Okay. I guess no more questions. Thank you so much, John, because
You're
I know
welcome.
because he worked hard because that PPT it was in Spanish or different language, but he
Yes, it was in
converted
Spanish.
everything on English. It's very difficult task, so he done and he presented in front of us, and it will be very great. Thank you so much, John. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, John,
Okay.
for the session. Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Happy to
Thank you.
participate. Have a good one. Bye bye.
Bye
Yeah, thank
bye.
you, everyone.